Pour écouter cette session en français, veuillez cliquer en bas de votre écran sur l'onglet Interprétation
Hello.
et sélectionner le
Bonjour.
drapeau français.
Ayalew.
On behalf of ICLEI Africa, the Africa Centre for Cities, our future cities.
Surge Africa and the Red Cross Crescent Climate Centre.
We are delighted to welcome you to the Rise Africa 2023 Action Festival.
Rise Africa is a platform that brings together thinkers, doers, and enablers
to inspire action for sustainable cities.
This is the third edition of our virtual festival.
It brings together insights, practices, and visions from across the continent.
This year's theme is The Cities We Want.
The cities we want.
The cities we want.
The cities we want.
This mirrors the African Union 2063 Agenda Vision, the Africa we want.
It is a wonderful Pan-African call for transformative change.
However, the agenda does not adequately embrace urbanization as a potential positive force for improving prosperity, inclusivity, and environmental well-being on the continent.
We need more emphasis on the role of cities and local action. And this festival aims to provide inputs into this agenda.
The cities we have are
Expanding,
incomplete,
inventive,
contested,
facing impending crisis, yet brimming with potential.
The cities we want are
People-centered,
Safe and healthy.
beacons of culture,
unflinchingly modern.
And adapting to change and leading global innovation.
We'll make these cities through
Experimenting.
learning
Collaborating.
and amplifying the everyday actions of people who are shaping their cities.
The festival invites you to embrace different ways of knowing.
It invites you to forge new partnerships,
Experiment with new concepts and ideas.
To seek ways to bridge science, business, policy, and the arts.
Together, let's enter this space in the spirit of poetic possibilities.
Nous venons tous de diverses cités, et c'est cela vraiment notre diversité, la force formidable de notre continent. Et pourtant, nous marchons encore sur des routes fragiles. Comment construire notre Afrique avec ce terme malhabile, cette allure galvaudée loin des initiatives qui pourraient de nos villes faire une place active? Et que dire? Que dire à présent de notre gestion, de l'eau que l'on gaspille parfois sans concession, des ordures recyclables mais jamais recyclées, de ces paysages admirables mais bien souvent trop gâchés? L'histoire rappelle que c'est l'Afrique qui nous rassemble et que pour la construire, il faut agir ensemble. Moi, je veux une révolution de nos villes. Je les veux plus vertes et je veux de l'accueil des cités merveilleuses. Et puis, bon pied, bon œil, au gré de leurs histoires sur les pas d'une histoire. Car nos villes, c'est l'aventure. Nos villes sont nos miroirs. Pour l'urbanisme intelligent, nos villes nous appellent et nous interpellent pour l'action maintenant.
Hello Africa, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are, whatever your time zone is. I hope you're all doing well. My name is Abul Ajak and I'm a filmmaker and I'm speaking to you from Kampala. I also run a creative company called Afro-Diorama, and Afro-Diorama is a company where I try to utilize creativity to create exciting content for the African continent, about the African continent with African people. I am very interested in our stories, in our narratives, in our histories, and most importantly, what all this could contribute towards our future. I am always excited at the possibilities of film, of communication, and what it can do towards helping us imagine new futures, how it excites our imaginaries, how it allows us to go deeper into our current realities, the painful realities, the happy realities, the things we're excited about, the things that we are working towards resisting and towards transforming. our future is not an individual dream or an individual pursuit, but rather a collective one. And it is something that we could all contribute in different ways, in our own capacities. And for us to be able to contribute that, we have to, first and foremost, to be able to believe in our ability and in our capacities to change our spaces. I'm here to talk to you today about my web series called Thinking Safety. It's rather a collective effort, and it was a collaborative film that I created with active participation from a variety of young women who were living in Cape Town, and it is widely available on YouTube. I tend to define Thinking Safety as a participatory design-based ethnographic web series, and while it seems complicated, I would just like to break down to you those terms. So participatory is a mode of filmmaking that usually entails some sort of active participation from the filmmakers, whether that be through contributing their own ideas, through self-filming, and through deciding what aspects of their reality that they want to film and they want to show. The director does not hold all the creative control of a participatory film, but rather this creative control is shared with participants. I had control in the sense that I deliberated and wrote down the questions, and there were questions that I thought about based on my own experiences as a woman living in Cape Town. And for the participatory aspect, I sent these questions to different participants who agreed to be part of this web series, who answered these questions and who self-filmed their environments, and who were also allowed and encouraged, in fact, to interject and to critique the questions, to critique the editing process of the film. Ethnography is usually defined as a scientific description of people and their cultures and their customs. And I wanted to utilize this ethnographic methodology in a collaborative way. And I wanted to use this ethnographic approach in a way that allowed us to map out the territory of what safety was or what safety is. And this is not like a static experience that's fixed in a specific time. This is an experience that is temporal. It's defined by history, by the present, and also affects the future. So because of this, I think it was important for me to create a space where people were actually asking themselves these questions, but also trying to understand how this specific issue, the specific phenomenon is felt, it's experienced, it's embodied. And it was also a design-based film. So design-based was looking at how aspects of design affect our movement within space. And all this was, within the realm of safety. So how does design affect our safety? How does structural design, social design, the design of our societies, or the design of very specific instruments and tools that we use when we're navigating spaces, how do all these things contribute towards our feelings of safety? This web series has 4 episodes. One explores safety and what safety is. How do we define safety? What do we think about safety? Do we think we have attained safety? Is it elusive? Is it something that's even possible? The second episode looks at responsibility and what mechanisms of responsibility are required for us to feel safe. How is this responsibility distributed, and how should it be distributed with individuals and with institutions? Those were a few of the investigations that I enacted with my participants. And I do recommend that you can watch it. It's available on YouTube, so just search up Thinking Safety. It's also fully available on our Instagram page at Thinking Safety. While I was creating this web series, one of the things that I learned in this constant exposure to violence, to sexual assault and to sexual harassment is something that a lot of women feel alone in. We do not feel that we are getting the adequate support from social institutions. And not just women, this is also something that's happening to a lot of queer people, where in fact right now in different African countries like Uganda, where I live in at the moment, a lot of queer people their safety is being discredited entirely by the state, and the state does not consider their need for safety and their right to safety as well. Safety essentially is a human right, and all my participants agree that we have a right to safety, and without the safety we will not be able to fully participate within society. We won't be able to contribute our ideas. People who are experiencing a situation are usually the foremost experts on their situations, on their personal experiences. It can't be academics. There are a lot of solutions that are existing within the minds of people who are experiencing certain situations that we never give a chance to speak, people that we never listen to or engage with. And I think through engaging with these people, our minds can be opened to the possibilities of social solutions that could help us counteract some of our most pressing social issues. So, for example, for us to be able to understand disabled people's experiences, I can imagine enacting a design-based research in collaboration with different disabled people and listening to their problems and being able to co-create solutions with them. We have come to understand democracy as something that happens once every 5 years in elections, when we get to decide and vote upon a leader. But outside of that, there's no democratic creation of space. There's no democratic input towards our development. That's something that's a top-down sort of engagement as opposed to a bottom-up process. And so these are the kinds of things that I hope, through using participatory means and using ethnographic means, but also ensuring that these participatory and ethnographic means are more inclusive. So thank you for listening to my lunchtime lecture. I do believe that we as filmmakers, we as artists, even governments and everyone in this society has a role to play in transforming what we are experiencing. We cannot negate people's voices. We need to be able to bring people towards a space of empathy, towards a space of understanding, and towards speaking about their own experiences in ways that allow people to remove the blame from disadvantaged groups of people, but to rather focus on the psychological effects of certain social structures, and in a way that allows us to slowly dismantle these effects, both physically within structure, within space, but even within our own minds and within our own understanding of our rights. Thinking safety will not necessarily transform the world. It is only a web series. It is a responsibility for us as individuals to take care of ourselves, but not just ourselves, but our society, the people within it, and the environment.
So good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Ayalew Getachew, and I work at the Secretariat of the African Committee of Experts on the Rights and Welfare of the Child. This is one of the organs of the African Union which monitors the implementation of the African Children's Charter. Today, I'll be speaking about issues of African cities that children deserve. There can be a lot of angles that we can actually approach this issue, but my approach would be informed by child rights-based arguments. So basically, these are the issues that I will be addressing as part of my presentation. First, I'll say a few words about why cities for children. Why are we talking about cities in the context of children, and how friendly is child-friendly city, and what are the factors that we need to take into consideration. And of course, we will talk about the major challenge addressing the cities that they don't deserve. In that regard, we will be focusing on few issues, and of course, these are not exhaustive issues, but I will be just focusing on, in my view, are the major challenges that children in many African cities are facing. And I'll be speaking about issues of child labor, and children in street situation. The issues of substance and drug use in the context of children's rights and how that's linked with the cities that we have. Cities where every child feels that they belong, cities where no child is abused online, and cities free from the climate crisis. And finally, I will just mention a few issues in relation to cities where children have adequate food, health services, housing, water, and sanitation. And of course, towards the conclusion of my presentation, I will say a few words as a way forward, giving some ideas which could inform our activities towards African cities fit for children. So the first question that we need to ask ourselves is why cities for children? I mean, what's the rationale behind to talk about this segment of society that we call children? I'm sure you've heard that Africa is considered to be the world's youngest continent. 60% of Africa's population, as we speak today, is below 25 years of age. And most of them are below the age of 18, and they are still children. That makes the continent the youngest continent in the world. Not only that, children and youth constitute the largest age group residing in different cities, including African cities. And currently there is a huge movement of people, including children, not only cross-border movements, but also internal movements, movements from rural areas to urban areas. In all these facts, children are especially vulnerable. And of course, we're now comparing children, boys and girls, with adults, and considering their physical maturity and the social exclusion that they have been facing across ages and across centuries. Children are vulnerable, particularly in matters related to city design, and I'm going to talk about that later as part of the next slide. In relation to policy formulation, in relation to decision-making processes, children are not included and they are not consulted properly. So that puts them in a very vulnerable situation. So this exclusion of children from the entire history of ancient and modern architecture, because they are not considered as human beings. We all say that children are our future, and that's true, they are our future, but they are also present. They live also in the present time. So children are not only our future, but they have also their own present. They are human beings today as we speak now. And of course, they will also form our future. But the fact that society does not consider children as full human beings, so to say, with rights and privileges, which needs to be protected and respected, that resulted in exclusion of children from all the discourse that we have. So hence we need to talk about children. And of course, as most of you could be aware, we have two schools of thought: the protectionism, child liberation debate. In the child protection debate, which considers children as only vulnerable part of the community, so they need to be protected. And the child liberation considers children as individuals with full autonomy. Hence, they need to participate with no limitation in all aspects which affect them. I argue that we don't have to apply either or approach. We can apply a hybrid approach where we can put both protectionism, as they call them, the welfare rights, and liberation theory, which focuses mainly on the right to child participation together, and apply a hybrid theory in terms of protection and promotion of children's rights. So children are, yes, they are in vulnerable situations, so they need to be protected, but they are also human beings today, so they need to participate. Their views matter. So any discussion that we're talking about cities that children deserve, it has to be informed by the fact that children need to be protected because they are in a vulnerable situation, but also they need to be consulted and their views matter because they are human beings as we speak now and not necessarily in the future. I think having that in mind, we can then proceed to answer the question, how friendly is child-friendly city is? Of course, looking at the literature, you can get different factors and different elements which could inform a child-friendly city. And I will focus and I will zoom in into the context in Africa later. But generally, a child-friendly city is a city where the voices, needs, priorities, and rights of children are an integral part of public policies, programs, and decisions. And a child-friendly city is a city that has a good start in life and grow, that allow the child to have a good start in life and grow up healthy. A child-friendly city is a city where children are protected from exploitation, violence, and abuse. A child-friendly city is a city where children have access to quality social services, experience quality, inclusive, and participatory education, and skills development. And the list is long. As you can see from the slide, a child-friendly city is a city where children live in a safe, secure, and clean environment with access to green spaces. And a child-friendly city is a city which enables parents to spend more time with their children than on their cars. It is an oxygenated city where trees have been planted not only by parents, but also by children themselves. So the child participation bit of it in building their own cities, not necessarily for the future, but for today, comes into picture. So when we try to oxygenate our cities, we really have to take into consideration the fact that children can also have a role to play in that process. A child-friendly city is a city where, with breastfeeding areas, play spaces, safe routes for children, particularly when they go to schools, family-friendly outdoor spaces, on-site changing rooms and toilets with accessibility ramps. A city where planning systems are geared not only around cars, house buildings, and the economy, but also to the environment, health, and quality of life. So it's not only about the buildings and structures, of course they matter, but it goes beyond that. So generally, which will now lead me to the child rights arguments, a city, town, community, or any system of local governance committed to improving the lives of children within their jurisdiction has to realize the rights and freedoms of children as they are protected in the global and regional human rights and child rights instruments. That's what we call a child-friendly city. So a child-friendly city should be guided and informed by what we call the 4 cardinal principles of children's rights, which are non-discrimination, best interest of the child, the inherent right to life, survival, and development, and the respect for the views of the child. So to have a child-friendly city, we need to install systems which do not discriminate among children of any color, of any gender, any status whatsoever. A child-friendly city needs to be in line with the requirement of the best interest of the child. A child-friendly city has to pass the test of the requirement of the right to life, survival, and development. And of course, as we have said before, we cannot establish and we cannot put in place any child-friendly system in our cities without involving children themselves, because they are human beings today, and they don't have to wait for the age of 18 for them to become human beings. So they are not human becomings, but they are human beings today, as they say. The other issue, the fourth one, that we all aspire to see cities free from the climate crisis. And as we all know, and as UNICEF called it, the climate crisis is a child rights crisis. The flood that we see in a number of African cities, the drought, extreme floods, which has been killing a number of children in different countries, recently in South Sudan, Uganda. Drought, for instance, like there is a recent study released by the United Nations, which indicates that 500,000 of Somali children are at the risk of dying because of the prolonged drought. These are not interesting figures. These are very alarming figures that we see as a result of the climate crisis that we are facing globally, but also in Africa. And children are taking the major damage in terms of the climate crisis. So we all aspire to see our cities free from the climate crisis by implementing by implementing policies and the standards that we have. And we also aspire to see cities where all children belong. And when we say all children, in its strictest sense of the term, it includes, and it should include, all children. Children with disabilities, refugee children, children of refugee parents, children of undocumented migrants, all children, boys and girls. They need to feel that they belong to the city that we're living in. No child should be detained because of their immigration status or the immigration status of their parents. They need to feel that they belong there. So birth registration services need to be provided to all children, including non-citizens in our cities. Education and health services, recreational facilities need to be in place to all children beyond citizens. No child in our cities should be left stateless. And these are protected rights under the African Charter on the Rights and Welfare of the Child and the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child and other international and regional human rights instruments. We all aspire to see cities where children have adequate food, health services, housing, water, and sanitation. And these are the major challenges that we are facing in the context of African cities. To conclude my presentation, just few ideas as takeaways. We need to work towards establishing African cities which are fit for children. In doing that, we need to take into consideration these facts. One, it's not all doom and gloom. There are, of course, positive things. There are increasingly, our cities are increasingly trying to respond to the challenge of children in terms of education, having the right health services in place and everything. There are positive developments and progresses, we have our own African values that we need to build on. The social capital that we have, the role of the extended family that we have in Africa, we need to build on that in providing child and installing child-friendly cities in our continent. To address this disconnect between national legislations and protected rights, particularly through the Constitution, and policies and regulations and directives at the city administration level, I think our municipalities and local government structures, they need to consider having human rights advisors, including children's rights advisors, in their city administrations. That will help us to include child rights issues and human rights issues from the very beginning, from design to execution of our plans and projects in our cities. The environmental impact assessment, which is attached to licensing different projects, need to also be expanded to include human rights impact assessment, so that in implementing our projects, putting our designs in place, we see the human rights, including children's rights impact of those projects. And we need to take into consideration, yes, children are our future, but they have their own present today. They are human beings today. So we need to include them. And understanding the layers of vulnerabilities is also very much crucial. In this regard, we can apply the intersectionality principle to respond to the various challenges that various groups of children are facing. One size fits all may not be a good approach to address the challenge that children are facing in our cities. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ayalew.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining me today in this thought-provoking discussion on how reimagining rural futures can inform African cities. Let us embark on a journey that challenges conventional wisdom and sparks new ideas for the cities we want. Migration and immigration have been a big part of African historical and contemporary cities. Migration can be glorified when pertaining to certain demographics and scenarios, but it can also be demonized and weaponized in South Africa, particularly when concerning continental migration through xenophobia or rural-urban migration through categories such as urban sprawl and informality. I'm interested in unpacking not only the ways that people flow from rural to urban, but also the cosmologies and cosmotechniques that follow. Cosmotechniques is a term coined by philosopher Uhuru. The term cosmotechniques specifically stands for the unification of the cosmic and moral order through technical activities. The term responds to this idea of pluriversality by suggesting that the various cosmologies of various societies manifest varying technologies responsive to their own cosmic order. Hui suggests that technology is not anthropologically universal, but rather that it is enabled and constrained by particular cosmologies which go beyond mere functionality and utility. Therefore, there is no one singular technology, but rather multiple cosmotechniques. Although Hui's arguments evidently have large implications on how we perceive the global future of technology, it also has further implications on our perception of cities and rural landscapes. Rural, in the context of this presentation, refers to previously categorized Bantustans or homelands in South Africa, the places of traditional settlements which host a rich archive of pre-colonial heritage. They are grounds of stability that anchor households in the city, which refer to them as Makhaeng, homes in plural, rural, village. There is a way that these things from these places are made, the objects, tools, spaces, all constructed with their own unique cosmic order. In our research at Rural Futurisms, we study these cosmotechniques and how, in specific contexts, they are rooted in mobility, movement, and migration. How does a mobile society design objects that can be carried or left, abandoned, that can be given an afterlife, another meaning? The site of our recent inquiry is Makgobistad, a Barlong Borratsidi village near the Botswana border in Mahikeng. The Barlong were a migrating tribe, much like other Bantu tribes, migrating not only because of diminishing resources, but also as a form of conflict resolution or a conflict resolution mechanism. In this system of migration, low-cost investment in material settlement was contrasted by high investment in language, where plural, cosmic, and moral order were relentlessly archived in praise poems, songs, sayings, greetings, dumelang, botu, lekai, batu, motu, kimotu, kabatu. Arturo Escobar teaches us that not only do we design technologies, but that technology further designs us. And this is evident in the design of platforms such as Zoom, which have redesigns what meetings or seminars can be into webinars, or how AutoCAD has redesigned the architect from being one that draws on paper into one concerned with software and laptops. At a larger scale, the implications of this is, societies where people sleep alone or individually own land tend to be more individualistic than societies where rooms are shared and land is communally cared for. These communities are governed by varying cosmotechniques. Our languages, objects, and our cities are designed by whatever cosmotechniques we have in place. It is not to say that cities must all be designed with plural cosmotechniques like those of Makgobistad, but rather that we know that we can and must design cosmic and moral orders through technical activities that do not resist change, but embrace it. How can we do this? At Rural Futurisms, we believe in having more collaborators. We collaborate with craft makers, storytellers, but also we collaborate with materials, blurring the binary between designer and designed. We believe that materials can be a site of spatial innovation. We study clay as an ancient ancestor that holds stories which have moved from hand to hand, that has constantly evolved in time and through landscapes. We also challenged clay that was once mixed with cow dung, making ecosystem, and clay that is now mixed with cement for more durability in the absence of migration. We challenged the clay with sawdust and mycelium and reminded of ecosystem migration negotiation. And so, in reimagining the African cities that we want, let us reimagine cosmologies, renegotiate our techniques to make African cities with new materials that don't end up perpetuating the same systems of oppression we have today. Let us make cities that are negotiable, much like our rural landscapes and informal settlements. There is always something to learn beyond the initial gaze. In conclusion, we at Rural Futurisms believe in collaborating with materials to design objects, techniques, and cities that design the kind of people we want to be. Thank you.
My name is Ojok Okello. I am a rural futurist, also founder and CEO of Okere City. I am so delighted to share some ideas at the Rise Africa Festival on a topic I am particularly interested and passionate about. How can holistic rural development catalyze the future of sustainable African cities? But let us first trace back and understand the relationship between cities and rural areas in Africa, which I think is quite exploitative in nature. According to the World Bank, about 55% of sub-Saharan African people live in rural areas today. But also it is in the rural areas where poverty levels are the highest, with about 400 million people living below the poverty line. And about all these 400 people living below the poverty line, up to about 79% of these people live in today's rural areas. And the poverty rate is even highest in rural areas, as it is more than 17%, almost 3 times more than those in urban areas. In Africa, human development indicators such as good nutrition, better health and educational services, higher literacy rates, and access to better infrastructures and social amenities are mostly common in urban areas compared, of course, to their rural counterparts. But we also see that the climate change and its devastating impacts is hitting rural areas more than urban areas. But all these predicaments is making massive people run away from villages into rural areas. And there is data to demonstrate this. For instance, in 1950, just 27% of African people lived in cities. The number grew to 42% in 2021, and it is projected to reach 80% by 2050. In 1986, the Spanish ecological theorist Ramon Magaluf argued that when 2 ecosystems of different levels of organization are coupled to each other in an asymmetrical exchange of energy, matter, and information will occur between these 2 different flows, from the less organized ones to the more organized ones. And let me repeat. In 1986, the Spanish ecological theorist Ramon Magaluf argued that when 2 ecosystems of different levels of organizations are coupled to each other in an asymmetrical exchange of energy, matter, and information will occur between these 2 different flows, from the less organized to the more organized one, will be greater than the reverse. As a result, the less organized ecosystem will be exploited by the more organized ones. This ecological rule appears to govern the current city-to-village relationship, in which the city can be considered as the more organized system and the village the less organized one. Unfortunately, until rural areas in Africa are transformed, rural poverty shall persist, and poor rural Africans shall throng African cities in their millions. And once in cities, they shall become part of the poor urban dwellers who live in squalid slum conditions and create multiple social, economic, and political strains. How then can radical and sustainable rural transformation turn this exploitative relationship to enable African cities to become more livable and progressive in decades to come? Perhaps the answer to this question partly forms the basis of our work at Okere City, a rural futuristic initiative in northern Uganda. For decades, Okere suffered from cattle rustling by the Karimojong warriors, and it was overwhelmed by the Lord's Resistance Army rebel activities. Despite the immediate impact of such conflicts, such as, of course, loss of properties and lives, Okere is today reeling from the legacies and the devastations of these conflicts. A victim of history, the legacy of northern Uganda's conflicts have been economic disenfranchisement and destitution, flight to urban areas, high HIV and AIDS, gender-based violence and adult illiteracy rates, and an intergenerational transfer of post-traumatic stress disorder. Just let me recap a few heartbreaking current contexts. Adult illiteracy rate in Okere currently stands at 72%, and early childhood education enrollment rate is just a paltry 5%. And the situation in Okere doesn't deviate significantly from other villages in Africa and maybe in Uganda particularly. And if nothing is done to overturn these paradoxes, then the dream of a progressive and thriving African cities that we so much desire and deserve cannot be achieved. Established just in 2019, Okere City has emerged as an experimental futuristic African village, showcasing the practical meaning of sustainability by designing and implementing sustainable projects and programs that promote environmental management, whilst at the same time enabling us to attain financial stability and reduce over-reliance on foreign assistance. Because most problems that rural areas face are systematic and deeply rooted, which makes them extremely difficult to eradicate, a sustainable and holistic rural development approach could provide, perhaps, a magic bullet. Indeed, Okere City is managing to lay the foundation of what a progressive and sustainable African rural city could look like by investing in basic infrastructure and providing services and goods to the rural people of Okere. The vision of Okere City is inspired by Afrofuturism and rural futurism, which aspires to remove the countryside from its detention in the past and create a sustainable and a decolonized space for the residents to be empowered enough to realize their potential, as is the characteristic promise of the city. Our work is premised on the belief that using holistic and participatory rural development approaches to design and implement community initiatives that inspire self-determination within the population is the best thing to do. And since 2019, our ecosystem of 20 social businesses and community projects serves a total of 10,000 clients through targeted provision of goods and services across the health, education, agriculture, tourism, and finance sectors, designed not only to economically empower residents, but to meaningfully address these crippling legacies. And so far, 2,000 learners have benefited from our functional adults education, early childhood and primary education, and vocational skilling programs. Up to about 5,000 patients have been treated at our health facility, and 100 women are members of our Share Butter Cooperative Society, and they have significantly seen fundamental improvements in their household income from under $1 just a few years ago to now $4. Okere City's interventions are successful because of our insistence to involve the community at every stage, from planning to implementation, monitoring, and evaluation, thereby building a strong sense of trust and participation, which are key ingredients for sustainable community development. But how then can the rural areas in generally catalyze the urban areas to sustainably thrive? I strongly believe that the countryside is undoubtedly where the most decisive battle to protect and conserve the environment shall be fought. Rural people live in solidarity with and closeness with nature, and thereby emerging as their natural and best custodians. Rural areas have more land, for instance, that could be utilized to plant trees that shall help to absorb and offset dangerous greenhouse gases usually emitted from urban areas. But urbanization has taken a dangerous toll in Okere, for example, as the demand for charcoal in urban areas has largely contributed to the cutting down of share trees, which are both crucial cultural and ecological and economic assets in the village. And to avert this predicament, Okere City has embarked on a mission of planting 2,000 share trees each year since 2019. And Okere Share Cooperative Society adds value to the share nuts by making share butter, which is sold to urban buyers. Again, catalytic rural transformation is important because it renews interest in the countryside that eventually helps to reduce unproductive rural to urban migration, which puts a lot of strain on urban spaces and life. When significant investments are directed towards the improvement of access to social amenities and other services, rural life and reality are made more meaningful and enjoyable. In the process, many social economic opportunities are created, allowing people to live decent and dignified lives in the countryside. In fact, when economic opportunities are expanded to the rural to urban migration, urban to rural migration could be occasioned. And at Okere City, we have already experienced trends where up to 30 resourceful people in the village who had left the village for the city to work as teachers or nurses have returned to become our key service providers. And in fact, Okere City is also emerging as a community tourism destination where urbanites come over the weekends and during holidays to take time to relax and breathe away from the fast and consuming life of the city. It is also very important to note that when people in the rural areas gain access to better social and economic opportunities, their aspirations for better services and products also increase, providing a unique opportunity for cities. The need to target and satisfy the needs of this new rural bottom of the pyramid market with tailor-made products and services creates significant opportunities for innovation for urban businesses. For instance, radical innovations shall be needed to change consumers' behavior and rethink the ways in which products are designed, made, and delivered, thereby giving the companies the opportunities to meet both profit and social impact objectives. Another point I would like to make is also that holistic rural development offers unique opportunities for rural dwellers to become part of the rising African middle class. It is undoubted fact that the Sub-Sahara's rising middle class, sometimes referred to as the roaring African lions, have the opportunity to drive prosperity in the continent. Unfortunately, the rise in Africa's middle class is mostly an urban phenomenon. Writing more than 2,000 years ago, the Greek classical philosopher Aristotle argued that a strong middle class fulfills 5 major roles in society. 1. The middle class obeys reason and appreciates knowledge. 2. They are best suited to rule and be ruled. 3. They keep a regime stable and in check. And 4. They also make it harder to separate the people into competing factions. And lastly is that the best legislators usually come from the middle class. And with all these beautiful attributes of the rising middle class, I think it would just be prudent and fair that the critical masses in rural Africa are also included or are rising to become part of the middle class in Africa. Other advantages, of course, of a thriving rural Africa is that urban areas shall be able to have consistent, reliable, and affordable supply of food and labor force. As rural people gain access to better technology, capital, and knowledge, these resources are directed into agricultural investments and education of rural children, providing an unlimited supply of the much-needed food and skills which are prerequisites for both sustainable rural and urban development. My insights and arguments above show the inextricable linkages between sustainable rural and urban development in Africa. Of course, there's no way we are going to be able to achieve the goal of building thriving cities when the countryside is abandoned. The abandonment of the rural Africa spells doom for cities in many ways. The data is clear. More and more Africans are descending to the cities and towns. Yet, they only come to compound the existing social economic challenges that are clearly evident today. Yet, many investments that can facilitate holistic rural development provide better opportunities that can lead to better and cheaper supply of food and other essential resources that cities need to thrive, such as skilled labor, cleaner air, raw materials for industrialization, among others. Moreover, when rural areas thrive, fundamental shocks that are automatically extended to cities are nipped from the bud, giving today's cities significant opportunities to create and innovate towards building African cities of the future that we want. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to share my insights with you, and I look forward to your very much constructive feedback. Thank you very much.